And hello again. Glad to see you came back. As you know from the last time, we're getting very deep into these subjects now. We are taking all that learning that we picked up in the first 4 to 6 to 9 sessions that you might have been in, and now we're applying it either to the personal, to the organizational and business, or eventually we're going to apply it to the community and even to our societal viewpoints. So right now we're working our way through that, and the time before last we actually brought ourselves to the epiphany of knowledge accumulation when we did what we called the learnership integrated systems architecture and some of the different programs and topics that were available with that, and the personality characteristics of people who do this kind of work. They're enjoying doing this kind of work because it's not for everybody, because you really have to be open to more and more ideas, and you got to keep expanding. It's not closing down and making anything fit into a tiny niche. And we're moving now into the organizational system development chapter and part of the program. And what I have to say as a lead into that is that organizational system development is social synthesis at the macro cognitive level and uses recognized benchmarks for achieving highly efficient and effective organizational performance. The organizational elements selected for intense management and focus are the organization's direction, the organization's operation, and the organization's performance. The universal goal selected for organizations is high performance, and the key role to be played is leadership. Learning, knowing, and leading inform and activate organizational system development. Once again, something that you've seen before, particularly if you are a business major in your field, particularly if you are in organizational management, particularly if you're interested in building organizations that succeed and enterprises that grow. The area of your life, depending upon where you are, some people achieve their certain performance level and then they do that until they leave their job and they retire. Some people continue to work into their later years because they don't want to leave the job, or they go out and become entrepreneurs. They take some aspect of their business and they continue to do it with greater intensity, and they come out and they become their own leader of their own particular professional network. That's open to you too, and particularly in this program, we go deeply into this. We actually have consultants and coaches to teach this piece, so we go deeply into that because we're focused on high performance. And in our overall chart of how this is blended together, we're at chapter number 11, because we're building on the fact that everything we learned before, including what we learned as far as personal development, are now a piece of organizational development. Once again, we have 3 areas: direction, operations, and performance. When you look at an organization and how people manage organizations and how organizations are reviewed and approved for high performance, it has to do as to whether they have good direction, whether they operate efficiently, and whether they operate effectively in the marketplace because people buy their products and make money for them. But once again, it's always about one of these 4. Right now we're on the organizational social system, and we're using all of the reasoning competencies. And once again, people always have a notion of how to do work, but you always have to be reviewing it, coming up with new strategies, seeing if those strategies get you the results you need, and making adaptive moves to get you what you want. So it's a growth opportunity every single day of your life. This one diagram right here encapsulates all of what I did say and I'm going to say on this topic. This diagram is an actual diagram. If you look at the items that are highlighted in bold, these are areas that have been part of for about 20 years now, something called the Baldrige Quality Award in the United States. These are the areas that many people, many organizations have been involved in, training organizations, assessing organizations, and giving them highly recognized rewards and awards for doing good as far as leadership strategy, workforce development, process improvement, and so forth. So this is built on that particular work, which was done by a national committee 20 years ago. I myself was a member of that group. I was actually in that group, and I was one of the early learners of that group, and I took it into organizations, particularly the National Security Agency, where I was able to implement this as part of the Total Quality Management Program. In addition to the ones that are in bold, there are other things that certain leading organizations started to say, well, those 7 things are not the only things that we should be measured on. Culture is becoming more important to us, and we think culture needs to be a focus area for how well a company is doing. How well you design the structure matters, because organizations are not just all in one place anymore. They're spread all over the countryside and the world. How you make decisions makes a big difference, because with the kinds of people and mindsets we have in the open societies of the world, an awful lot of people want to be involved. It's not like in a controlled economy where only a few people make decisions. You've got to make decisions that many people will accept. Technology is exploding, as we all know. In some ways, it's leading where business is going, and therefore you have to be cognizant of the technology, even though you don't have to be an expert in it. And all this together was caught up by the whole emphasis in the last 2 decades on learning and knowledge management, which George Washington University, where I personally have been involved in this training, has been one of the leaders in creating knowledge management programs that can be implemented by organizations. Over at the George Washington organization, they use the idea of leadership, learning, organization, and technology to drive performance was their approach to addressing what the national goals were for leading and challenging organizations to constantly improve. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to show you the fact that there are specific pieces of work, diagrams that you can wrap a concept around, and you can deliver it as a consultant. One of them is just how do you think about an organization itself? How is it set up? Organizations basically have requirements that they're trying to fulfill for some group that will buy products from them, and they have core processes that deliver their product to the customers. In order to do that, they have to have all kinds of business support. Money, people, IT, facilities, and security all have to support those programs. On top, you've got the organizational management team that does the research, the legal, the executive leadership, financial management, marketing, and sales. The point here is, a lot of times people get confused by the particular kind of organization that they're dealing with, but every organization just about has to have all these functions. So it's important to know that when you start to learn about organizational management, you don't have to study it to death to see which organization is the right structure. We already know which elements have to come into play. And so what I want you to know is we have in our program, we have this particular structure that we use in talking about how to think about organizations. Following on, we have something like this that talks about the strategic workforce development and how you can grow people to do repetitive work and then define it and then manage it and optimize the work. And there's always continuous improvement where people, technology, and processes go around and around and around in their learning curve. And they are working, and what our human resource people do is make sure that all the people are learning their particular specialty in a way that it's contributing to the goals and the working processes of the organization. You always have to do decision making. This is just a chart on decision making, some basic principles. We already know from lots of research that when you're making choices, you have to make sure you identify the right subject. There's a bunch of steps that are important. We skip them sometimes. But what is the right subject? What are the objectives? You got to look at alternatives. Don't just pick one best way. You got to understand consequences, make trade-offs, clarify uncertainties, deal with the total risk, and consider linked and related decisions. It's not true that everybody knows how to make decisions. There's a process for doing it. We all have to make decisions, but we might just say, I think I'll just make trade-offs on my own, without thinking about the rest of these things. One of the things you learn in our program is know you're responsible for applying your thinking, your cognitive capabilities, your emotional quotient, and making decisions after you do some thinking on it. So there's always a cognitive, an affiliative, and an egocentric aspect of the people who are involved in making decisions. And we do know, much study on, you have to conduct your analysis. There is a process here, from strategy all the way down to performance analysis. And there are psychological traps, and everybody who's in the business of decision making is trying to figure out how to avoid people from making these psychological traps a problem for them. And one of the biggest things is people just want to do it their own way, which goes back to our study and our focus on the different kind of people who want different things and want different things in their teams, and they can't necessarily agree on what they want to do. Well, that causes a lot of problems when you want to make sure that you don't want to stick with the status quo, you want to use evidence, you don't want to deal with overconfident people, you want to use estimates that make some sense, you don't want to always look at what was good and say we can do that again. So there are traps in decision making that you have to watch out for. Then there's the whole business here of enterprise leadership. This has to do with the CIO's function. The CIO's function in an organization is very, very powerful, very, very critical for efficient operations. Because what happens is the CIO has to worry about fitting in with the strategic plan, has to do all the applications, the data, the platforms, the network and security, has to define requirements, plan acquisition, buy, develop, produce, and support the portfolio of things they already have, plus continuing to build an architecture that continues to bring it together. Anyone who's worked in this business knows how complex it is. Anyone who has worked outside the business and been responsible for having the CIO help them knows how demanding a CIO can be about what the customer, the internal customer, really wants, because if you don't feed what the internal customer wants, you won't have a job. If you don't really do it good and challenge them, though, you won't have a job anyway, because the organization won't succeed. CIO is a very, very important function. How about performance measurement? There's a lot of different ways that we do performance measurement. The one that I have found most helpful is one that says, what are our objectives, our improvement indicators, how do we know we're getting there, and how we're going to measure it? We got to do it at the organization level, the functional process level, and the job performer level, because you want to get effectiveness, efficiency, and consistency in behavior of people. Just a quick one, just to let you know, there are processes that some of us know how to use. You might want to learn these processes too. You might want to do some quality management, business process re-engineering, BPR. You might want to do some organizational process analysis. There's a methodology for doing it. And there's a methodology. You start here, you go up and down the line, you do the things you're supposed to do to find out what the problem is, and then you take action to fix it and come out with a plan and fix it. But down here is what the knowledge management planners. Before we had knowledge management about a decade ago, we always did this. Then somebody said, why isn't this working? It's not working as well as it should. And then we found out that's because we didn't know what the knowledge was that was really necessary to improve people's performance. So we started doing analysis of job by job by job, and we started to see that people who had the role of working in the process didn't have access to the knowledge they needed and updated knowledge that was relevant to what they were doing. So that was a whole field of how to look at the personal impact of the doer and how they contributed to the good process or not process not working. So knowledge management became an important part of improving the organization. The last thing I'm going to mention here is that, once again, guess what? Organizations care about money. And in case you don't know about it, of course you don't. If you don't know about it, maybe you've never been in the job that had to be the financier of a business operation. The only thing this chart tells you, businesses have income statements and balance sheets. And there are people who are responsible to keep track of where all the money's going and how it's being spent and the category it's being spent, and that everything's approved before the expenditure is made. And that's very important for the year-end balance sheet, and that's what's used to tell a company's leaders whether they're making progress or not and making profit. On the other hand, they have to take a look more focused on their daily activities on the income statement, because you can have some parts of a year where you're making lots of money, other parts you're not making much money, and that could be okay, depending upon the nature of the work that you're doing. Going back to something I showed you earlier, there's the whole idea of this balanced scorecard where organizational actions are reviewed as far as how well people are learning, how well they're putting that learning to use in the company for efficiency's sake, and then how well all of that is contributing to customer satisfaction, and that's generating financial rewards. So when you're talking about business, if you talk, I'm here for efficiency, I'm here for effectiveness, I want to change the learning, I want to improve the processes, I want to make our customers happy, I want to improve the ROI, guess what? You're talking executive leadership. And that's the kind of talk those people love to hear. If you're around people who are talking like that and you have no clue, there's a question why you are not getting ahead in your organization. And so if you are into this business, if you're a business management major, if you're into high tech, if you're into organizational functions, then your area here of high performance, you may need to pick a topic or an area that you want to be your specialty. Because it's hard to be everything to everybody, and everybody comes up in a stovepipe until they get to leadership and higher levels where you're responsible for blending the capabilities. But you got to start somewhere, but you got to be good everywhere you go in order to really rise up in an organization. Learning, learning, learning. On and on and on. And lastly, what would you do with this now that you know it? Back to business school? You have a technical degree, you decide to go for your MBA now because you want to run this, that's where people go. And they go to get a master's in business administration so they can say that I'm ready for the senior level of this work. And I recommend that to you. It's a good place to have a good career and a good life. And see you next time.